Welcome to the Self-Belief Podcast, the show that we shift your self-belief in, because self-belief shifting shifts everything. It's something that I've noticed about myself, and I know that I'm not going to be the only one. I'll buy a book. I get excited about it. I'll start reading it even. And then I put it to one side. And I kind of hope that the information gets into my head by osmosis. But even when I do read a bit of it, I don't always take it in properly. I read the words, but they don't always stick. And I go back and think, did I read that bit? Now, if I listen to something, it goes in differently. But I still need the book as well, because I like to highlight the bits that stand out for me. So what I've noticed is, it's not just about the reading, and it's not just about the listening. It's about how you take it in, and what you actually then do with it. Inside my membership, I read things out loud, and people keep saying the same thing. Something just clicks. They hear it differently. They understand it differently, and they actually want to do something with it. So I created something around that with my book, and it's called the Just Being You, the Live Experiment. Small group, just 12 people, and every 2 weeks I read a chapter to you, and you hear how it was actually meant to be heard. Then 2 weeks later, we do the continued writing from that chapter together. So you're not just reading something and moving on, doing nothing about it. You're actually stopping, noticing what's coming up for you and doing something about it. There's no homework, there's no pressure, just a space to actually take in what the chapters of my book mean in the way that I meant you to hear it. £75 and there's only 12 spaces. So if you've got books on your shelf that you meant to read, or you've read things and nothing's changed, this is the bit that's been missing. The link's in the show notes. There's a moment that happens straight after you say no. You've said it, you've made the decision, and then something shifts. You start explaining it, you add reasons, you soften it, you make it try and land better so that the other person doesn't feel uncomfortable. And before you realise what's happening, the boundary you've just set starts to move. Welcome back to the Self-Belief Podcast. I'm Jenny Field, your self-belief expert from Just Being Me. And today I want to talk to you about why we start explaining ourselves after saying the word no. This is the third episode in a series of 4 where we're looking at boundaries in everyday life. Not just the obvious ones, but the ones that are happening quietly in the background. Understanding how responsibility links to boundaries took me a long time to understand. Because once you start trying to set boundaries, something else often happens that people don't talk about very much. You might say no, but then you start explaining it. You add the reasons for your decision and you try to reassure the other person so they don't feel upset. At the time, I didn't realise that I was already changing the boundary that I'd just created. I believed I was simply being reasonable. If someone questioned my decision, I felt the need to explain why I'd made it. If someone looked disappointed, I tried to make the situation easier for them. Looking back now, I can see that what was really happening wasn't that I was explaining myself. I was slowly removing the boundary that I'd just tried to set. For someone who spent years taking responsibility for everything around them, saying no can feel really uncomfortable. It can feel like you've done something wrong or like you're letting someone down. For many people, that reaction began much earlier in life where keeping other people happy felt important. When you carry that belief into adult life, something else starts to happen when you try to set a boundary. The moment someone reacts, your attention moves away from what you need and onto how they feel about it. You start watching their reaction and trying to work out how to make the conversation easier again. If they question you, then you explain your decision in more detail. If they look upset, you try to reassure them. If the conversation becomes uncomfortable, you look for a way to smooth it over. It happens quickly and often without you even noticing. At the beginning of the conversation, you were clear about what you needed. But somewhere along the way, the focus changes. Instead of holding your position, you begin managing the other person's reaction. By the time the conversation ends, the situation often looks different from how it started. You may have said no at the beginning, but by the end of the conversation, the arrangement has changed. You might agree to help just this once, or adjust what you said so that the other person feels better about it. That's one of the reasons why people feel like boundaries don't work. They believe they've set one, but they haven't had the chance to see what happens when it's actually held. Because holding a boundary is very different from setting one. Setting a boundary is the moment where you say what you need. Holding a boundary is everything that happens after that sentence has been spoken. It's the moment where someone reacts and you resist the urge to explain yourself again. It's the moment where you allow them to feel however they feel about your decision without rushing in to make them feel better. For me, as someone who's spent years smoothing things over, that can feel really, really unfamiliar. If your instinct has always been to keep things calm, then allowing someone to feel disappointed can feel uncomfortable. If you've spent years taking responsibility for other people's reactions, and stepping back from that role can feel wrong. When I first started trying to set boundaries, this was the part that surprised me the most. Because I thought the difficult part would be actually saying the word no. What I discovered was that the difficult part actually was the thing that came afterwards. It was the moment when someone asked why, and I had to decide whether I was going to explain myself again or simply repeat the decision. It was the moment where someone looked unhappy and I had to allow that feeling to exist without trying to change it. For years, my instinct had been to keep conversations comfortable. If something felt tense, I would say something to ease it. If someone looked unhappy, I would say something to make things feel better. That behaviour had worked for me in many situations. It helped avoid arguments and it kept relationships feeling calm. But it also meant that my boundaries rarely lasted very long. I could say no, but I didn't yet know how to let that no remain. Learning that took time. It meant noticing when I was about to explain myself again. It meant recognising the moment where I felt responsible for someone else's reaction. Most importantly, it meant understanding that someone else's feelings were not automatically mine to fix. And that it's okay for me to put my needs first. When you stop trying to manage someone else's reaction, something new becomes possible. You can say what you need and allow the conversation to settle without adjusting it. The other person may feel disappointed, they may ask questions, or they may not agree with your decision, but the boundary itself remains clear. Understanding that difference changes how the boundaries work. And for a long time, I thought the problem was that I didn't know how to say no. What I eventually realised was that saying no was only the beginning. Learning what to do next is where the real change happens. Thank you for being here with me today, and I'll see you next time for number 4 in this series. Thanks for listening today. If you'd like to know more, you can find all the links down below. Oh, and don't forget to press subscribe so you can catch the next one. See you soon.